Hello and welcome to Pluribus Fireside Chats. Not as FDRs, but hey, it's something. Now, the last video I made, the one that just got released, that one dealt with one side of the electoral debate, or not necessarily the electoral debate, I guess technically yes, the electoral debate, but I also meant it in just like, I guess I'll just say it, Rosa Luxemburg's essay, it's got 3 words in the title. We dealt with one of the words on Thursday, and we're dealing with another one of the words this episode. But before we get into that, let's get right into the news. First news story is technically a news story about Europe, well, particularly a European nation, because in the time period this episode is coming out, like in between the episode's recording and the episode's release, there are going to be elections in Hungary. The elections in Peru are also going to happen as well, but this one's focused on Hungary, obviously. And, if you, I didn't know necessarily if making an episode was really, worth it, per se, I guess. Because it was just more, to be frank, I kind of didn't expect, clearly there seems to be some form of, there's something there, and you'll see why. And it's the fact that there is currently a election, again, the election is in Hungary, and Hungarian politics is very simple. A man by the name of Viktor Orban has basically had a illiberal democracy for a long period of time, with many people especially concerned about it because of various situations. Basically Orban, a lot of people worry that Orban and the way that he rose to power in Hungary is basically the blueprint that Donald Trump might hypothetically use if he wants to try and go through a longer period of power. And the party politics isn't really that noticeable because obviously, Orban's made it a point where he's basically got a massive control in the legislature. And there are some parties that are prevalent. There's the Respect and Freedom Party, which is basically a center-right, conservative party that is basically just we hate Orban. There's the Democratic Coalition, which is basically the broadly centrist, technically center-left group that's basically the opposition force. There's also a smaller far-right party that also apparently hates Orban or whatever. But basically, people are pointing out that there are some polls that are making it so that there is a potential, it's an illiberal democracy, so it's not necessarily it's one of the big problems. Illiberal democracy is one of the biggest ways that a lot of authoritarian regimes kind of try to exert some power while still also, especially in a lot of these I guess they're Eastern Bloc countries, where they technically allow you the ability to, have an opposition force, but that opposition force obviously will never, ever, ever be in any sort of actual prominent political power. But there are polls that are being done in this election that many people are seeing that could lead to, at the very least, a shift in power, a transfer of power. Granted, the power shift is to that center-right party I mentioned before, but people are basically hey bro, in these kinds of situations, any transition to power is a good one, and yeah, that is true. In these kinds of situations, any transfer of power is ultimately a good one as long as that transfer of power does lead to actual democracy. For example, in Mexico, the PAN winning, well, yes, I didn't like the PAN. You all obviously know, I do not like the PAN. Fuck the PAN. The PAN sucks. Vicente Fox sucks. He's terrible. But him winning was a good thing because it was a transfer of power. Navalny was obviously a very terrible figure, but if he had ever won an election or had become a transition figure for Russia, that would have been a good thing, even if he himself as a figure was bad. In Peru, not Peru, Chile. In Chile, there after Pinochet left office and then they started holding democracy, there were a couple of center-right conservatives that got elected. They sucked. Guess what? Better than Pinochet. We can deal with that later. Now that we actually have democracy, we can transition to make better candidates. But that has led to a lot of concerns that people that Orban won't allow this. And one of the things that happened was that there was a attack, Viktor Orban basically said there was an attack and he was blaming it on Ukraine or something. And everybody immediately concluded, false flag attack that he's going to use to try and remain in power. And it's even worse because Orban is basically, one of the big things about these international groups, because this is the thing. This is an international battle. This is not just the battle of, Viktor Orban or whatever. this is not a nationalist battle. This is a battle about the international far right. It's the same reason why Donald Trump propped up like Bukele and Milei. He props them up because if they fail, then their movement fails. They all have to prop themselves up and work together. That's why the neo-Nazi party in Germany is backing Israel. Because if they fall, Israel falls. The international far right has to prop them all together. And we're just seeing this objectively in a lot of areas. Like, I mean, El Salvador. Remember, El Salvador. El Salvador. I was gonna say. I mean to talk about Honduras, but yes, this also happened in El Salvador. But in Honduras, we saw Donald Trump basically tip the scales in favor of, his candidate, the candidate of their right wing. And we're getting into very strange circumstances where literally, like Viktor Orban keeps heading to the United States and keeps holding rallies and stuff with Trump. And, the United States keeps doing it with, Orban. And if you go to the Wikipedia page, you see that basically if you can imagine a world leader that sucks, they're endorsing Orban. All of them. Netanyahu, Milei, Trump, obviously. Many of them are all endorsing Orban. And it has even led to J.D. Vance to come out and say, guys, we are not interfering in the Hungarian election. Which means they are 100% interfering in the Hungarian election. Like, bro, they are. If they weren't, they wouldn't have to say it. I don't know what happens, but basically the big thing is just the thing. It's like, look, a fair situation would have that right wing with that candidate aside from Orban winning. That's the truth. Like, it's the same thing with Honduras. I mentioned this before. Like, in Honduras, it was any election result that was not going to go to Nasrallah was a fabricated result. And in this situation, it definitely will be, like, hopefully democracy prevails. We just have to wait and see how things plan out. Speaking of how things pan out, let's talk a little bit about some controversies surrounding Mexico. Because there's a news story that happened with Mexico that was good, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys probably would have wanted me to cover those news stories, but there's a couple of reasons why I'm not covering that news story. For one, I guess I'll mention what it is. It was that Mexico, like Claudia Sheinbaum basically announced that, Mexico's going to have universal healthcare, and a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, oh my amazing. But there's a little bit of a here and there about that. Like, let me explain. Let me just give a brief explanation. Like, the Universal Healthcare Project of Mexico has been a project that's been going on basically since AMLO's term. AMLO has been slowly making healthcare more universal in Mexico. They've had, like, I've mentioned this before, there's been a lot of problems with that implementation. His first step was to cancel the public option that they had and then make a brand new healthcare branch, but the problem is they didn't implement that properly. And then what ended up happening is that then he basically just announced that he was going to merge that with the currently existing social security system in Mexico, and that was basically going to technically, it was technical universal healthcare, because technically anybody had the ability to, but the problem was that there was like an enrollment problem. Sheinbaum's basically just announced that she's going to, effectively fully finish the project, like basically fully finish the project, where by 2027, Mexico will have completely universal healthcare, where anybody can go to any hospital regardless of your income. That's a good thing, yes, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are a little bit more, you just have to know the ins and outs of Mexican politics to understand, it's a little bit more to that than that. But let's talk about some negatives that happened with Sheinbaum. And first one is the fact that Mexico is still rolling out a biometric ID rollout. Basically, every Mexican with a cell phone, they have until July to hand over their fingerprints, iris scans, and facial data to the government, who, and according to the Reclaim the Net post, it basically says, like, the last two attempts that they implemented this kind of stuff led to a data leak and a Supreme Court smackdown. And I just felt like I couldn't really, my last podcast literally was all about the dangers of digital ID, so I can't just, not mention this fact. this is a bad idea. I obviously do not approve of this idea. This is obviously a Scheinbaum L. Like, Scheinbaum is, like, does this mean Scheinbaum will be worse than AMLO? I mean, that's one thing that was just a bit of an interesting factor. I was kind of wondering. I literally was thinking, like, would she be better than AMLO or would she be worse than AMLO? And that's one of the big things. Like, everybody knows that AMLO and her are kind of similar in a lot of policies. But basically, big thing is, of course, like, will she inevitably surpass him or will he inevitably stay on top of her? And another aspect that has been leading to a lot of criticisms in regards to, that kind of stuff is in regards to a current clash that has been going on with Mexico's ruling coalition again. It's a coalition between PT and MORENA. And if you know, again, my stances on Mexican politics, you know that those are the only two parties in Mexico that I think are good. So the fact that those two are fighting is a little bit of a troublesome thing. So I'm just like, okay, hold on. Let's see what's going on. And turns out the thing they're fighting about is copyright reform. So I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? Basically, Claudia Sheinbaum and MORENA are basically pushing for massive reforms to a lot of things with regards to labor laws, and like the two big laws that have been going on right now are the changes to the intellectual property laws and the changes into laws regarding labor. And while the law basically did pass along a like alliance vote, the AMLO alliance basically voted in favor of it, and the alliance for against it. They didn't even vote against it. They decided to abstain from the vote. But what ended up happening is that PT's coordinator Reginaldo Sandoval basically said we're approving this bill, but not really. We're only approving it so that we can continue having discussions regarding it. We don't think this is a perfect bill. And basically, the sad truth is I can't find what specifically they have a problem with. But basically, their criticism is that they believe that the bill that is being put forth in regards to the intellectual property law is way too friendly to corporations in Mexico and not necessarily as friendly to, say, artists and musicians. Saying of this bill, the lobbyists for the mega corporations kept circling the commission like vultures. There is a multi-million-dollar dance involving billions of pesos that ends up in the hands of very few, who are the ones who profit from the creativity and the interpretation and the voice of Mexican artists. We cannot leave artists, composers, and performers defenseless. This industry generates 4 trillion pesos in profits, and they cannot be left defenseless against the transnational corporations that drive and operate this activity. We demand the Minister of Culture listen to us as well. And this is where I'm just being reminded of one aspect that I do understand is a concern. Because basically, one of the major aspects of this intellectual property law, because I did manage to find something that has it written down in English that I could read and get an understanding about it. But basically, one of the main things that this law is doing is that this law is making the intellectual property law of Mexico a lot more like the intellectual property law of the United States. Now, I don't know the full extent of intellectual property law in Mexico. I'm probably going to have to do a little bit more reading there. But basically, clearly each individual country has its own intellectual property laws. But they all have to, ultimately, around the world, American intellectual property law is the one that reigns supreme, obviously, because we're the largest economy. We're the largest, we're the largest, basically, everything. Intellectual property law that does not take our concerns into consideration are a bit of a problem, especially in countries like Mexico and Canada, who very much rely a lot on trade with the United States. Basically, we all three have a unified trade policy with each other. So basically, here are some of the changes in some aspects of the intellectual property law in Mexico that I have found. According to this paper from JDS UPRA, I don't know if that's I don't know, but I don't know much about this place, but this is what they say are the changes in the intellectual property law of Mexico. Restoration of property rights. It allows applicants to restore property rights within a 2-month period following the expiration of the original deadline, i.e. 12 months for patents and utility models and 6 months for industrial designs. The reports note that this change aligns Mexico with international practices that provide corrective measures for priority claims. Significantly, Olivares noted that in a separate alert that the amendments to the FLPIP did not address the time limits applicable to the national phase entries of PCT applications, but suggests that the recent amendments may open the door for Mexico to review and potentially lift the restrictions currently in place with respect to national phase applications. Provisional patent applications allows applications to secure an early filing date with reduced formal requirements, with the applicant then filing a complete application within a non-extendable 12-month period. Mexican provisional applications may not claim priority from any prior application, will not be published, and will not be subject to examination. Priority documentation allows the Mexican Institute of Industrial Property to require the submission of a certified priority document and its Spanish translation within 5 business days following the expiration of the current term, i.e. 3 months from the filing date. Restoration of procedural rights allows applicants to request reinstatement of rights lost due to missed deadlines, including the failure to respond to office actions or pay grant fees. Reasons for reinstatement must be filed within 15 business days from the expiration of the missed deadline, counted from the business day following the expiration of the missed deadline, together with the previous omitted requirement and payment of the corresponding official fee. If the request is accepted, the IMPI will allow the application to continue prosecution. The report notes that this change represents a shift from the prior system where abandonment was final and irreversible. Right off the bat, I'm actually starting to see the problems. Reducing prosecution timeline and number of office actions. In an attempt to accelerate prosecution at the IMPI, this change establishes a maximum period of 1 year for issuance of a final decision in patent, utility model, and industrial design applications once substantive examination begins. If after the 1 year period there has been no resolution, the applicant may request the issuance of a mandatory resolution through a newly created specialized technical committee that is appointed by the IMPI's board of directors. This 1 year maximum prosecution period will apply for patent applications filed after the amendments were published. However, applicants having applications that were filed and pending prior to the publication of the amendments can still apply for mandatory resolution once the specialized technical committees have been assembled. Like, from what I'm gathering, it seems that they're just basically, like, whatever looseness of the intellectual property law of Mexico that existed is now currently being tightened because of concerns from the United States. I know one of you in my audience is Spanish, so I'm going to link the document from the official vote that happened that has like the full information of the bill. I mean, I can't even really translate it because it's not like a directly like translatable document, because it's not like on the page, like, you know, like with the United States with Congress.gov. But like, I mean, you could probably, if you could read it and give me like some like a little bit of a Cliff Notes version, that would be appreciated. Man, it should have sucked that I'm a Latinx that doesn't even speak Spanish. Rats. Anyways, speaking of rats, there's been a very interesting development from the United States and Iran in regards to their little kerfuffle. That was the fact that Donald Trump randomly tweeted one day that if he didn't receive a ceasefire deadline by 8 p.m., that an entire civilization would die. And sure enough, he basically said, like, okay, we're going to delay that by 2 weeks because, you know, that's what, you know, everyone made the joke. It's Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. Ha ha. It's like, yeah, but guys, you guys are kind of missing the point. Donald Trump literally just threatened a genocide. Is that not a big issue to you? And of course, this is the big thing that's just so fucking weird. It's just this entire foreign policy of the United States is so fucking stupid. It's just like, he says things, doesn't do them, walks away thinking that he's victorious. It's literally the meme that a lot of people said about North Korea, where it's like, they go to the Olympics, and then when they come back to their home country, they say that they won the Olympics. It's like, that's literally every time Donald Trump does anything in regards to foreign policy. He walks away thinking he won, and it's like, he doesn't even agree to, like, the ceasefire, apparently, was literally just what the Iranians promised 1,000,000 years ago, and then he's just like, I did that, and I won because I did this. It's like, this is a fucking, like, insane, sundowning fucking idiot. It's just sad and pathetic. And this sad, sundowning idiot is, I'm just saying, it's, like, so fucking weird. It's like, I'm literally seeing so much, it's like, and I'm just laughing, and I think I might have, like, philosophically turned from a nihilist to an absurdist, because it's just like, it's just like, all you could do is laugh. all you can do is fucking laugh. Like, honestly, there is not much I can say because it's just, there's so much, like unless you already follow his belief system and you're just a fucking cultist, there is literally, it genuinely is pathetic that it's that so many people believe. Like, it's weird. Americans don't even. I don't even know how many Americans. Because like I mentioned this before, but like when he gave his like little speech, I'm just like I just don't know if any of the people that were watching it with me like actually believed what he said. I know there was at least one person who didn't believe a single word that he said, but it's like it's just so sad. It's just like he says words, and it's just like if you literally know anything about what he's talking about, just anything, literally just Google any of the things that he says. It's just not true. Every single thing that he says is just not true. Iran is crumbling. Not true. Iran was going to do war. No, they weren't. It's why they have to turn this into like basically literally everything else except for what it is. Because you can't, there is nothing you can do to lie to you except for just make out super outlandish lies. Like this is a big one is just trying to turn this into like a fucking holy war. Like that's one of the big things, like turning this into a holy war, where it's like they say like, oh well, we're the army of God and the army of not God. It's like, well, I mean they're the army of Allah, and you gave them. It doesn't even work with that regard because they are fucking pathetic in that sense that like it's fucking pathetic because you don't even understand. You can't like they literally got the fucking like hardest line out there by literally like you gave them the hardest line. It was like the army of Epstein versus the army of Allah. Like you fucking failed in that regard. And there's even so much more about it that just doesn't make any sense because like I saw a tweet and it basically explained this and I had to do a little research. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, we are absolutely fucked in every regard. Like I mean, because like, I gotta say this about a lot of things. Want to turn this into a holy war? Got bad news for you, buddy. If you want to turn this into a holy war, Islam wins. I'm sorry. It's just real. It's just real. If you're gonna turn this into a holy war, Islam will win. Like, even a lot of the new far-right figures in America, a lot of them are Muslim. Like, it's Islam that will win. Islam is still seen as, like, the, like, for lack of a better term, the cool religion. Literally, it's the cool religion. Like I mean, being a Christian, that's lame. Being Jewish, that's lame. Those are lame. Those are lame, like, mainstay religions. Nobody cares about that. If you really want to be really punk rock, be an atheist. But even then, some people think, like, that's a little bit too much because, like, the internet atheism phase, I guess. But Islam is still, like, considered cool. There's, like, a Dark Matter 2525 video that literally explains this verbatim, where it's, like, where he literally explains, like, Islam is, like, literally, they still have legs to stand on. I mean, I have no stake in that battle because, again, I'm an atheist, but it's, like, again, like, if you pick and choose, like, I mean, in America, none of America's flaws can be blamed on Islam, I'm just saying. Like, you can't blame the Trail of Tears on Islam. You can't blame the, if you're gonna claim America as a Christian nation, then that's a big problem. If you're saying America is a Christian nation, then there really is not any route for Christianity to remain a prevalent force, especially when we live in an era of contrarianism. But another aspect came from that tweet that I mentioned earlier, where they basically explain like the reason why Iran and Islam or whatever, why they'll ultimately win, is that they perfectly understand our culture and we don't understand a fucking thing about their culture. And it's because of the whole memetic warfare that's been going on. Because like one of the big things now is like internet memes. That's the new warfare, apparently. Internet memes. And Iran's basically been posting like 15 million AI generated videos of fucking like Donald Trump. And it's literally the exact kind of AI generated memes that blow up in the United States already. Jokes about Trump being the pawn of Epstein, we've been making those jokes for a million years. Netanyahu being like a shill and like being a pal with Epstein, again, those are jokes that we've made already. Those are jokes that the United States have already been making for years. Meanwhile, we have no way to do that kind of like propagandization in the Muslim world because we do not understand Muslim culture. Again, we're the nation who still thinks it's a funny haha joke to be like, I love eating bacon. Isn't that right, my Muslim friend? Meanwhile, the Muslims literally sitting there be like, you are an absolutely disgusting creature. Because that is literally what you guys don't understand. Muslims don't eat pork because they think pork is disgusting. That is what it is. we're the same country that will make jokes about like, oh, these are people who don't even know how to wipe their own ass with toilet paper. And it's like, most Arabic countries have things like bidets or literally just hoses and water, which is objectively a cleaner way to clean yourself down there than what we do. But the tweet that I keep mentioning was a tweet that literally put it in the context of post 9/11, where one of the big jokes that American publications, American like figures always did about Osama bin Laden was the fact that they kept making jokes about Osama bin Laden hiding in a cave. That was one of the big jokes about him. Like, you know, he hid in a cave. He's running and hiding in a cave. And that was one of the big things. Everybody was like, you know, hyping it up. Like, he's hiding in the cave, hiding in the cave, hiding in the cave. And that was the kind of thing that they would try to use to propagandize. People were like, oh, you really want to be on his side? He's fucking hiding in a cave like a fucking coward bitch. And then meanwhile, it's like, in the Arabic and Muslim world, being in a cave is a good thing. In Islam, the way Islam was created was literally by Muhammad going into a cave and being talked to by Allah. Allah met him in a cave and gave him the word of Islam. And that is what is and it's perceived as a good thing. When Muslims are like, we are scared and we don't know what to do, they go to a cave because that is them going like, we are seeking the path of God. That's what they do. It's the equivalent of an American going to their pastor when they don't know what to do about their life. That is considered a good thing. If they made jokes about like, you know, oh, you Americans, you go to a church when you don't know what to do? Haha, that's pathetic. That wouldn't work on us, because in America, a lot of people perceive going to church and being being humble in that kind of regard as a good thing. And when they're in a position where they can't even sell you the war, they force it on you. With the United States Congress pushing for the bill that, they pushed this bill in already, and it's basically, the implementation is about to begin, where it's like, they're going to launch an automatic registration for the United States military draft to begin in December of this year. And that immediately made me go, wait, it wasn't already automatic? Because I remember getting a letter in the mail like a million years ago when I turned 18 that literally said that I was registered in the Selective Service. Was it not automatic? Where'd that letter come from? What? And then we get into the tidbit where it's like, every American man from ages 18 to 25 will be, you know, registered in this system by, like, automatic registration will be, you know, begin in, like, and, like, basically it's like, it'll, like, go through that, and it'll, like, you know, by December 2026, I guess. I don't know if they will all already be registered or if that's when it starts implementing or whatever. I don't really know. But the fact of the matter is like, do I wait now? Like what? Like what do I do now? I think the only reason to, like, at this point send a letter to them would be basically to get your conscientious objector, like, thing sent. Because I guess that'd be the one thing, like, you know, I'll include a link in the description to, like, a military, like, a thing where it's, like, you know, that gives you the ability to, like, you know, that tells you what to do to get a conscientious objector, like, thing done. I guess if you want to, like, go through, like, the official route, I guess. I mean, unless you guys want to be an absolutist. I don't know what you guys want to do. You guys can do whatever. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess, I don't know if I can do, I don't know if I gotta be as cautious as Eugene Debs when I talk. But I basically already made my position on this very clear, so I don't know if I haven't said it before, I'll say it now. I will not go to war with Iran. I do not. I refuse. Under no circumstance will I join the United States military, voluntarily or involuntarily. My philosophy does not dictate that I do that. I am a pacifist and I am an anti-imperialist, so I will not participate in that endeavor. I was already under the assumption that it was an automatic system, and only learned otherwise once you pass this new law. So yeah, maybe I'll put something like that in writing, just in case, but, you know, that bridge will be crossed if a new draft happens. Fingers crossed it doesn't. But anyways, let's move on to the next news story, the last news story. It's about a new Donald Trump law, or Donald Trump plan, and it's bad. So basically, Western officials met in Ottawa last month to discuss potential terrorism threats in light over the United States-Israeli war against Iran. And their big conclusion is, of course, they're going after Antifa and far-left terrorism, which includes specifically name drops threats from communists, Marxists, anarchists, anti-capitalists, and those with eco-extremist and other self-identified anti-fascist ideologies. Going on to state, it is important to recognize their actions as political terrorism rather than mere protest or criminality, said her prepared remarks, though it was unclear if she delivered them exactly as written. As evidence, the speech was pointed out by a left-wing protester who recently clashed with the police in Italy. Basically, they're also trying to make this claim that they're trying to make this claim that there's this massive Antifa movement that is being being controlled by foreign governments or whatever. And the article very quickly points out the very big shift about it's again just a very clear shift against left-wing movements, obviously. But the big thing is what happens because he's going after a boogeyman. Antifa as an organization does not exist. It does not exist. It's amazing that this has been going on for this long. And of course it's been going on for this long because movements like this clearly don't care. Remember, this is the same people who claim that Cartel de los Soles was an actual drug cartel that was the controlling of the Venezuelan government. And then the second that they got the so-called Venezuelan president that was controlled by this cartel, magically they said, oh, this cartel doesn't exist actually. It's all a boogeyman. It's all a lie. Which is, of course, antithetical to reality. Over the past decade, there had been 152 terrorist attacks in the United States by right-wing extremists. Meanwhile, only 35 attacks have been attributed to left-wing extremists, and jihadists have been struck with they don't mention how many jihadist attacks happened, but they go to the death count. The death count for the left-wing terrorists is 13, the death count for right-wing terrorists is 112, and the death count to jihadists is 82, which is right-wing, extremists. So, I guess the reason why they're putting them in two different categories is because jihadist groups are they're clearly not in the same vein of right-wing terrorism in the United States sense, obviously. But that's again, it's just the big thing. It's what is this? What is this? What is the whole point of this? Is this just rhetoric, or is this actually going to lead to something? With people again bringing up things like the NSPM 7. I forget the exact acronym off the top of my head, but it's that presidential memorandum that basically said oh, these ideologies will be the ones that we deem as dangerous ideologies, and it includes basically just anti-capitalism, anti-fascism, and but I think they include anti-religiosity in there. So it's which leads to the big SpaghettiOs. So what happens now? I don't know. I don't know. What does this mean? Does this mean I guess one of the big theses is obviously that the Red Scare is coming back. There's going to be a third Red Scare essentially. How that Red Scare gets implemented, I don't really know. But basically, the conclusion is that there will be a third Red Scare, or that we are currently in the third Red Scare. Left-wing ideologies will be obviously demonized by the media and the president. They might make some showboat trials and that kind of stuff. The different Red Scares kind of obviously had different tactics, but they were all probably the same thing, suppression of the left. How does third Red Scare go? We'll have to wait and see. But now, on that vein, let's move on to the main topic of this video, where we'll be discussing a very interesting philosophical question. Because realistically, people on the left, you all thought this, right? This question has popped in your head. Don't lie, it has. I've seen you lefties on Twitter, and I've seen righties on Twitter as well. A lot of people are very clearly their brains do be running wild. Lefties. A lot of you lefties are somewhat revolutionary minded, and some of you are revolutionary minded to a LARPing degree. The thoughts have even ranged to the point where even some liberals are starting to get a little antsy and starting to be weird about it. And I guess weird is I guess that would be a term you could use. But remember that guy, Nicholas Decker, who wrote that Substack article that got him in trouble? You know the one I'm talking about. The one that had a title that definitely would catch your attention. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen a lot of videos from some lefty creators or whatever talking about it. But why don't we talk about it a little bit more? And not in the style of someone who wants to be Lenin Jr. let's try to have an actual philosophical understanding of the question. So, let's talk about it. As a leftist, and just as anybody who is interested in history, we all understand, revolutions have happened around the world. Obviously, America, France, Haiti, Mexico, Russia, China, Cuba, etc. A lot of countries have had some form of revolution in their time period. And there are many historical events that, while not technically revolutions, can be classified as somewhat revolutionary-minded. The United States Civil War has been considered by many historians as the Second American Revolution due to the massive social and political change that it enacted in the United States. Even as me, if you know me, I am a reformist-minded. I'm a reformist. TLDR, very shock of all shocks. I, Pluribus, am a reformist socialist. Cringe L, you know me, I am a member of DSA. Ew, gross, yucky. I support people like Eugene Debs. Gross. I think Graham Plattner could actually be good instead it's gross. I actually think that the pink tide has led to good things and can be classified as socialist. Ew. But again, just objectively, we all understand, every single human being understands the fact that even though as much as we love, we love the idea of enacting, peaceful, loving, democratic change to the world. We love that. But we also understand that sometimes it just doesn't happen. Again, in a historical context, America would not exist had it not been for some people going, hey, let us do a revolution. And sometimes revolutions can be good. Again, I mentioned a couple of them before. Haiti, Mexico, France. That's right, I just said the French Revolution's a good one. I'm tired of pretending it's not. Thank you, Rosa Versailles, for letting me fully embrace it. I literally just did a poll just 2 days ago where I literally did the flag. That flag's meaning is very important. I know it's slightly muted when it comes to the fucking on the video playlist, but look at the flag. The flag is literally a symbol of reformism and the two sides of the question, reform v revolution. The red obviously represents the revolutionary side, and the blue represents the more reformist side. But then they also have the star in the middle that splits into two, splits so that there's red on the blue side and blue on the red side, because it's one cannot exist with the other, the revolutionary spirit and the reformist minded attitude in regards to practicality. I took an 8 values test and it said on a social progress thing I was very revolutionary, but obviously the DSA symbol is in the middle because again, broadly I'm a bit more aligned with reformist ideology, but also that symbol is just fucking great. The symbol of the two hands clasped together with the rose, again, the rose, I'm using the rose. I have the fucking character Esau the rose. I don't have Esau the fucking red flag. I ultimately think reformism is good and can lead to good things. But again, I'm a lefty, so, I've also expressed admiration for figures that are more revolutionary-minded. Emiliano Zapata, Subcomandante Marcos, Che Guevara. I'm wearing a Che shirt right now. Vladimir Lenin, Hugo Chavez, Fred Hampton. I guess technically, would MLK count? I don't know if MLK counts. He's more of a reformist. But, I included him on the list just because, some people would say what he espoused would be revolutionary. Malcolm X was more of a revolutionary. There's also just, again, sometimes you just have to have a revolutionary mind, not necessarily revolutionary, I only say this because the next person I was going to mention is, would Aaron Swartz count as revolutionary? Because he obviously had a revolutionary mind in regards to the element of copyright, obviously. He published the Open Guerrillas Manifesto, where he literally just said, guys, he basically just openly advocated for people to commit piracy. Is that not revolutionary? And that's not even to get into the fictional revolutionaries that I'm sure a lot of people like. It's very obvious that a lot of people like their revolutionaries in the media, for me, there's V from V for Vendetta, Cassian Andor, Karis Nemec, Oscar Francois de Jarget, Bernard Chatelet, but they're fake. It's easier for us to do that for, history and for fictional characters because of the simple fact that revolutions are not a game. It's one of the big things that you gotta understand whenever you do the whole, revolutionary LARPing or whatever. Because revolutions are not a game. That's one of the big things that's just like, that ties me to not be a revolutionary, I guess, in the sense of just literally that. Revolutions are not a game. It is a very serious endeavor. People die in revolutions. Like, I mean, again, my main issue with a lot of the LARPers who cosplay as revolutionaries on Twitter. You guys aren't doing it seriously. You guys are just doing it for the lulz. You guys are just doing it for, like, the aesthetics. Like, I'm being serious. Are you prepared to grasp with the reality that in that scenario where you are in a revolution, that there's a very high likelihood that you and many of your comrades will die? Or the possibility where you will have to take someone's life? Are you prepared for that concept? Are you prepared for that? Not just the fucking rich guy that you have some power fantasy against. Not that. Not just them. There are many people lower on the threshold that are going to be in your way. Are you prepared for that? Now, I'm sure there are a lot of you who would say yes. But again, I don't believe you. I mean, I either don't believe you or I think you're an insane person. Because there is no way that you truly believe that. I need you to be serious, contemplate it, grasp with it, mull it over, and then really come back with an informed decision on that regard. Like, it's a meme that you guys have not, I made a meme like fucking 5 years ago, and it's still relevant to this day. It's a meme that you so-called quote-unquote revolutionaries on Twitter always fail.
Oh, hey Frank, what's up? How you doing?
Here's the gun.
What?
Here's the
Revolutionary Declaration.
Let's fucking do it. It's
What
time.
the fuck? You gonna put this on me?
You guys will go on and on and on about it in your hypothetical Twitter war to live your fucking power fantasies of that you'll be the next Lenin, that you'll be leading the workers' vanguard in the United States or whatever. But what are you doing about it? What are you going to do about it? You're just sitting on your ass on Twitter complaining about DSA secretly being a CIA op or something. Meanwhile, all the real revolutionaries didn't do that. They got up and actually did something. I remember around that time that I did make that. I don't know if this interaction is what made me make that video or if it was just, whatever. But it was just like, I got into a Twitter argument with a person named Esha from historic.ly or whatever it's called. And I used that meme against her, basically calling her out because it's just like, you're fucking stupid. She was again complaining like AOC is secretly like a CIA op. And it's just like, you're sitting your ass on Twitter complaining about AOC. You're not a revolutionary. You're a fucking shit poster on Twitter. And then her response was quote tweeting that and responding, quote, that's the nice thing about tankies. We don't LARP, with a picture of Yakov Pavlov as if that's a fucking gotcha. Like, she posted a picture of a soldier in a military and, again, basically trying to paint the thing that she and him are similar, that they are the same or whatever. It's just like, does that not sound insane to you? Like, that she genuinely believes that she's on the same level as this fucking guy who fought in wars and put his life on the line? You're exactly like those brain-dead chuds who want to join the US military for their stupid power fantasy and treat it as if it's a game. It's not. It's a serious endeavor. Their other response is usually to talk shit about people who are like so-called electoralists. Like this week, the big thing that coincidentally was like with ContraPoints, who made a similar like big meme about it. And it's like she made a post shitting on them and they all got mad and triggered by her. And it's like, big problem is, you guys keep proving it right. You guys keep proving it right. It's sad truth. ContraPoints, it doesn't matter what you guys do. ContraPoints is being proven right. Yeah, I get it. ContraPoints sucks. She's, whatever, Zionist shill. She, loves Hillary Clinton or whatever. She's dating Chelsea Clinton or whatever. I don't fucking care. The point is, her political action is being achieved. Yours isn't. And you guys are not doing anything to even remotely facilitate any political change that you guys want. You're doing nothing. You guys are doing nothing. You're complaining on Twitter. Meanwhile, all the real people who would be considered revolutionaries didn't do that shit. They got shit done. Lenin got into arguments with the International, but then he proved the Socdems wrong by actually, doing something. The Gen Z protests in Nepal were borderline, if not actually revolutionary. And they just got up and got to work. And it wasn't like American liberal protesting, we're dancing in the frog costumes, haha. No, the Nepalese protesters were literally threatening to throw Molotov cocktails at the Prime Minister's house and were giving directions on how to make them. And they knew it's one of the big things that is just fundamentally, you guys don't understand and you're not grasping. They fully knew the consequences of what they did and what they were doing and what would happen if they lost. As did John Brown, as did Che, as did Rosa Luxemburg. And they did it regardless of that because they truly believed that there was no other route for them to enact positive change in the world. And that's my genuine understanding of this thing. Like, if you truly believe that this is the only route left for political action to enact positive change in the world, then you all have a moral imperative to publicly, loudly advocate for it, regardless of what happens to you, even if the consequence is death. That's the truth. If you genuinely believe that revolution is the only path forward, you would be in the situation where you accept that death is one of your only options. That is the truth. But you guys don't. You guys don't. Because you're fucking scared of dying. I know this. Everyone's scared of dying. It's okay to be scared of dying. Dying is a permanent thing. It's a bad thing. There is no God. There is no heaven. There's no whatever. So yes, dying is very bad. It's why in the modern day world, the people who are most likely to do political violence are people people who are on the political right. They're not afraid to die because they genuinely believe that they'll be rewarded in the afterlife. They genuinely believe that their God is telling them what they're doing is right. And ignoring all the anti-government militias on the right that pop up, and they just be real. They exert their praxis, but they don't have things like empathy. But you guys do. That's a good thing. That's the point. The people on the left have empathy. I would assume majority of them should have empathy. That's ingrained in their political philosophy. You shouldn't want to do that. And it's fine to admit you don't want to do that. You don't have to pretend that you do. You can admit that you don't want it. As Fidel Castro once said, it's the path that oppressors imposed on the people. And so the people only have two choices left: to suffer or to fight. Lenin was described as one of the least egotistical and least self-centered people in the history by Bertrand Russell, a guy who didn't like him. And that's the mindset that led his movement to succeed. It truly was never about him. Meanwhile, there are other movements like the Shining Path who wanted to, quote-unquote, do the revolution or whatever, and they claimed that they wanted to do it for positive reasons, but ultimately the real reason was that they wanted to make Gonzalo the number 4 face on the communist banner. And I think that is what a lot of the so-called LARPers on Twitter, that's what a lot of the LARPers on Twitter are. This is not for any sort of actual good thing. They want to have a revenge fantasy against the elite and, want the idea of that one day they will be the next revolutionary thought leader. Not to name drop a specific YouTuber, we'll call him Awful Saltenia. Him especially is the most pathetic of all of them, because it's literally, it's just even the ones who would you call revolutionary leftists, who are at the very least somewhat reasonable, would at least say there are other routes that you could perceive to be quote unquote not necessarily, basically they just don't really like the use of electoralism as the end all be all, and of course electoralism is not the end all be all. But this particular guy goes way further, because he says, okay, you're not allowed to vote. Not just you're not allowed to vote for the Democrats or DSA people. You're not allowed to vote for even the minor party candidates. There are no unions. No, you can't join a union. Unions are bad. You're not allowed to go on ships to help Cubans. The only thing you can do is the thing that I'm not allowed to say on YouTube. Yeah, that is the one thing you have to do, which is why you're not going to do anything in regards to it, and you're just going to virtue signal on Twitter and complain about it in your stupid videos. You guys, these LARPers are the same people who get triggered when we say, hey, take an hour out of your day and bubble in a name, and maybe, whatever. And then also get more offended when we point out the objective fact that we were right to tell them to bubble in a fucking name because things have automatically gotten way worse. Even to the point where to this day, they will still try to argue that there was actually no difference in what happened in the election. No, Kamala Harris would not be bringing trans illegal. No, Kamala Harris would not have kidnapped Maduro. No, Kamala Harris would not be labeling the ideology of anti-fascism as a terrorist ideology. No, Kamala Harris would not have taken us to a war with Iran. Like, no, unless you guys are going to provide me with a specific quote from Kamala Harris where she explicitly says that she would do any of those things, which I know for a fact doesn't exist. You citing the one time that she said, oh, I don't like Iran, doesn't work. No, she said, let's not leave the Iran nuclear deal. Hey, let's not go to war with Iran. Again, if you guys are still getting triggered by that, then yeah, I have no faith that you guys are going to do any of the actual like very big things that you would have to do in a situation like that. Because you guys are not doing this for the right reasons. You guys are doing it for your selfish self-fantasies. That's what you're doing this for. Very antithetical to the International, isn't it? Which, has the lyric, when we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. And doing things for wrong reasons very much can lead to really, really bad outcomes if you're not thinking clearly. I think a prime example of this would come from the controversial historical figure Leon Czolgosz. I mean, I was interested in looking into Leon Czolgosz during a pretty depressing era of my mental state during the 2024 election, because one of the major outlets that I have for escapism was the concept of dark people. When I say dark people, I don't mean, in a obviously like color sense. I mean like people who are like, I guess you could label them bad guys in history. I guess if the term makes sense. Like I mean, if I showed you some videos, I guess I'll just mention it. There's a YouTuber called Turkey Tom, and he makes some YouTube video essays, and I watch a couple of them, usually the ones by like some very like fucked up like figure. Not because I necessarily sympathize with a lot of the like figures per se, again, like we all know this, like, true crime podcasts are like a very prevalent thing where like they like post like, oh, this serial killer killed 34 people and they do that kind of stuff. And those are very popular. Like people in like America, I don't know if it's just an American thing or just people in general, but a lot of people just have a fascination with dark figures. And Czolgosz was a somewhat fascinating figure. Like again, like I think I mentioned it in the video where it's like we know, there are 4 men who did like an act that is perceived to be the unthinkable thing. The most powerful man in the world taken by one man. We know a lot about a couple of them. Like we know a lot about John Wilkes Booth. We know a lot about Lee Harvey Oswald. We don't know as much about people like Charles Guiteau and Leon Czolgosz. And we know a little bit more about Guiteau nowadays because of the Salmonella video. And hopefully, maybe we know a little bit more about Czolgosz because of my video. But like Czolgosz, again, is interesting in history because like in history, like we don't know how often we talk about like the stuff like in my schooling days. We know, I don't know, again, like we don't necessarily know, it wasn't necessarily like taught a lot in school, any of the like assassinations in U.S. history per se. Like Lincoln's is mentioned obviously because that's an important one, and JFK's is mentioned obviously because that's an important one, and they mentioned McKinley's a little bit because he was an assassination that happened that was a precursor to the Progressive Era. But it's usually mentioned in that one era of context. It was like, but before the Progressive Era, there was William McKinley, and his vice president was Teddy Roosevelt. And after McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist, Teddy Roosevelt became president. That's basically the only context that we really get from McKinley and his assassination. Again, and that kind of gives you down one end gives you quote unquote all the information you need. He was killed by an anarchist. An anarchist is someone who doesn't believe that a government should exist. So of course, a person with that ideology would do that to a person who is of the government. But then you start doing a little bit more research into Czolgosz, the situation in the United States at the time period, the situation of McKinley's administration in specific, Czolgosz's administration, like Czolgosz's like life, and then you start to realize, I'm starting to see why this guy's motivations weren't necessarily taught in schools. Not necessarily condoning the actions per se, but again, it's like a thing. You just gotta understand cause and effect. Things that happen in the past lead to things that happen in the future. And while the full extent of like Czolgosz's like motivations and whatever are like fuzzy to an extent. Like, some people argue that he was, like, mentally ill because, he had a mental breakdown at one point. I didn't necessarily find any information about that claim that he had a mental breakdown when I did research into him. But the fact of the matter is, even if you want to have the most... I don't know if I can even phrase it that way, but, like, if you want to have the belief that he was doing it for a reason, like the propaganda of the deed, per se, like that kind of, like, interpretation, like that term, propaganda of the deed, is basically where a lone wolf does something like that, and then that is supposed to spark wider rebellion, which I don't even necessarily know if that was necessarily Czolgosz's, like, motivation, per se. I mean, it's just, again, like, I mean... It's a little hard to really contextualize, like, Czolgosz's, like, full motivations. But again, if you even want to perceive it in that way, ultimately, what did Czolgosz's actions do? Well, he got caught and then executed, and then his own ideology got hurt because the United States started suppressing anarchists. Now, I don't necessarily know if most... Like, I mean, even most anarchists would not necessarily condone, Czolgosz, obviously, for various reasons, and like at the time and in the present, they don't condone his actions, and I'm pretty sure I'm not even necessarily sure like revolutionary leftists would even condone his actions. I mean, but that would actually be an interesting lefty polls. I'm sure with the anonymity of Twitter polls, that would definitely be a very interesting endeavor, and that's definitely of course one of the major ideas. That's one of the major just understandings of that side. But let's go about it slightly on the opposite side of things. Again, I am, a leftist and just a person who literally has opened a fucking history book. Sometimes there are situations, like just as a human being, we understand that sometimes situations happen where there's literally no other option left. If a man is breaking into your house and you have already warned him multiple times what will happen if he doesn't walk away from your door right now, and he doesn't listen and manages to break your door down, what other option do you have left? Like, I mean, that song I quoted earlier, that literally is predicated on the notion that, again, like literally, it's like that song again, like, for their aggression, let's be inspired by life and love, though they model for concessions, change will not come from above. Like, it acknowledges the fact that sometimes the people in charge do not let the positive change happen naturally. So sometimes people have to enforce the process themselves. I'm a nihilist, and again, one of my major things about my nihilist perspective is that, sometimes, I don't believe that things will just naturally work out in our favor or naturally work out in the better. And sometimes people have to, be the change they want the world to be. The Russian nihilist movement is what partially inspired the Russian Revolution. I may be a pacifist by nature, but there will obviously be a limit in some capacity. If I'm walking down the street and some dude punches me, I'm not going to sit idly by and let him punch me. I'm going to punch him back. Sometimes an authoritarian, despot, they don't let positive change happen. And, Benito Mussolini went down swinging. In a literal sense he did. And that begs the question poised at the title of the video. When will it be time? And simply put, I think there's just really only one logistical answer. When there is no other option left. I believe that as long as there is a peaceful measure to resolve our issues, we should exert our resources into that. Let us use the American Civil War as an example. Some, in hindsight, think that we should have done things in the past, differently. We should have done this or that, or the U.S. should have tried to enforce that a bit more. Or whatever, they believe that something should have been done earlier. And yes, we understand that now. Well, there are some things in the past that I obviously think we should have done differently in the context of the American Civil War, particularly in the aftermath of how we should have punished the traitors, but you could also make the case that had things not played out the way that they did, things would not have turned out the way that they did. Like, American abolitionists had tried literally every single peaceful measure prior to the Civil War happening. They tried democratic elections. They started their own communes in certain areas. They had peaceful debate and discussion with the people who were, of the slavery side, and tried to enact, the natural changing of the times. That's what they said when they believed. And what were they met with? Violence. Charles Sumner literally had a debate with another senator, and he was beaten nearly to death. But it was the fact that he was beaten nearly to death that led to John Brown to begin to resist not so peacefully. He was, again, he could have just started killing people for the fun of it, but no. He saw peaceful measures be taken, saw that they weren't working, and then went, well, unfortunately, situations changed. The same can be said about the French Revolution. Unless the Rose of Versailles lied to me, Robespierre and the Third Estate wanted to try literally every single peaceful measure to reform France and make the France better. But the King of France refused to listen, and as such, they were pushed into the situation. In Mexico, even when bourgeois liberal democracy was being pushed away by Porfirio Diaz, it was like that. It was like, they were just like, okay, well, we accept that real democracy is not there, right? Even bourgeois democracy isn't working. So that was left, like, people of Mexico were left with no other option but to, go that way. Now, some of you would probably argue that that time has arrived already. I would a little bit disagree, but I understand where you might raise your eyebrows. Things like the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, but also, the U.S. government making it made the agreement that they had the right to murder a woman who was obeying the laws and fully cooperating with the law enforcement, even stating, I am not mad at you. You truly can't look at a situation like that and then not ponder the question. And that's the thing, you have the right to at least ponder the question, because obviously, everybody agrees there is a line. There is a line. Everybody agrees there is a line. Where that line is obviously up to individuals' interpretations, obviously. It seems that that's what the big consensus is. It seems to be up to every individual's interpretation. The United States, I think, is the only country around the world that has an explicit law that literally says you can do that. It gives implicit permission should the situation arise. Again, in the historical context, we also understand that there were some people who felt that it needed to be invoked immediately, and then George Washington's like, no. But most people would accept that there is a line. Again, it's just a measure of where that line is. To me, the line is, again, simply put, when there is no other alternative. I still believe that we have opportunities to enact things peacefully. As long as we have a peaceful means, we should exert our power with those peaceful means. I'm not just saying this because of my pacifism, although that is obviously a major part of it, but I also I don't advocate for Graham Plattner to go to the United States Senate just because. I don't do it for the favorability points. I don't do it for the lulz. I don't do it for whatever. I do it because I genuinely believe Graham Plattner can be a valuable asset in the Senate and can enact positive change. Whether or not that positive change is too little or whatever is one thing. But I believe that in any semblance, we need to, even if it's just simple harm reduction, that is better than the alternative. And I think that's also, I can't say that every single revolutionary-minded leftist is like this, but there are, I would assume, a troubling amount of you that were like this, that genuinely were like, let Trump win, and then that will push us into this idea. But it's like, again, you're doing it for the aesthetics, you're doing it for the lulz, you're not doing it for any actual, semblance of, moral or, whatever, that kind of stuff. And even in a sense, even not just in the sense of, you could, again, I believe that it can actually be accomplishing a lot in that kind of sense, but even it can be as little as something as a rhetorical sense. One of the big things that does lead to some people to shift towards leftier causes is the very stark contrast between reactionaries showing who they really are. Part of the reason why the civil rights protesters finally managed to win the hearts of white America was literally because white Americans in the North were seeing news footage of black student protesters getting sprayed down by fire hoses that would literally burn their skin off, and dogs literally violently mangling them, to the point where they're like, maybe we should do that civil rights bill. Something's really fucked up down there. The Unite the Right rally basically killed the alt-right, for the time being, due to the fact that the Nazis were so cartoonishly evil. And, in a very tragic sense, Even situations like Renee Good and Alex Preddy's deaths have led to some liberals even getting more radicalized, again, after white America sees, oh shit, the police can kill us too? A lot of these so-called revolutionaries like to pull this one, they like to make this shtick, a lot of people like to make this shtick, just as a funny, again, they like to pull like a funny, I don't know if it's a funny joke or just like they actually, I guess they genuinely believe this, but it's like they do the like line of like, well, if voting actually did anything, they'd make it illegal. It's like, they are. Like, what? Like, the Republicans are trying to pass a massive law that would like disenfranchise tons of people in America. They've made like multiple voting rights, like they gerrymandered a lot of like voting districts to like make it so that it's harder to vote. They've been actively encouraging people to like vote they're doing basically everything they can to try and rig the next couple of elections. It's like, guys, you can't pull the card when they're literally trying to make voting illegal. Like, what? Even Lenin understood the importance of elections, not saying me and him are, one and the same. Obviously he had a little bit of a different interpretation of like how elections work, but like he ran in elections and he did advocate for voting for candidates like the Labour Party. And, there was that one fucking Vosh debate where he like fucking like debated, I think Mike from PA, where they were talking about like, he said he advocated for voting for someone in 1912. I don't know who. If that's true, I don't even know if that's true. That probably is not true, because like when I did look it up myself, I found like basically every article of him being like the candidates in 1912 sucked. I think he gave like a slightly favorable view of Debs, but I mean that makes sense. But I mean he didn't give a he said like, I mean I think Mike from PA or whoever said it was fucking like the Bull Moose Party he was advocating for, but like I saw an article that said like he hated Teddy Roosevelt, but like yeah, but like they're like, I mean the British Labour Party is the one that makes like the more big one, like it's the bigger one. But again, I'm not gonna claim that me and Lenin are the same person. Where I'm not that shallow. I'm not Vosh, obviously. Thankfully I'm not. And I don't necessarily know what Lenin would have said in this modern day political sense. That's one of the big things about, like, I just don't like hero worship. Like, again, you can admire these figures and understand their philosophies and understand their ideas and what they advocated for at the time period. And even, point some similarities in that regard. But I just don't believe, because, like, some people are actually doing the thing where it's like, Marx was right about everything. No, he wasn't. Lenin was right about everything. No, he wasn't. They weren't. I don't care if you literally cite every single example of them being right. It doesn't matter. They're not right on everything. If they were right on everything, no single figure is right on everything. That's just a fact. And it adds this sort of, like, saint-like figurehood of them that it's just like, no, they're human beings. But again, like, to engage very realistically with the argument, there would possibly, hypothetically, be a period where that could happen. And, I mean, there are some examples. Like, I mean, let's just, like, I mean, this is the thing. I'll just say this. For 250 years of the United States' history, we have had regularly scheduled elections. Every cycle that an election happens with no delays. Even in the midst of the worst economic depression and a civil war, those were probably the worst times in American history, and yet people still showed up to the polling places. There is not a single situation where any delay or flat-out cancellation of elections should be accepted. Not a one. Not a one. The United States also has this wonderful tradition of a peaceful transition of power after a president's time in office is finished. I am sure that there is a vast majority of Americans who would love to see that tradition continue. And we are looking forward to time periods where that tradition will continue. And under no pretext should any attempt to prevent either of those things from happening be taken lying down. It's a very drastic response to a very drastic event. Like, literally. That is literally just, that's like, it's like supposed to be like the appropriate response. Like, if someone teases you in school, you don't immediately grab a knife and slit their throat. Bit of a lopsided response, wouldn't you agree? But if that kid gets to the point where they are violently threatening you, naturally, if they're violently threatening your life, what are you going to do in response? Newtonian response. It's a Newtonian symptom, like Newton. Every action should have an equal and positive reaction. To get slightly dark and morbid, I would basically describe the situation as when it's most needed is the situation where both roads lead to death. I mean, that's a bit of a big one, but it's like in a situation where it's like both roads lead to death, but one gives you a slight hint of a fighting chance. You know, an interpersonal example that people could use would be like a cancer diagnosis. A person, you know, they get diagnosed with cancer, and you have two options now. You either 100% die of cancer, or you maybe die of chemotherapy. A broader political example in the modern day would be Palestine. The Palestinians are left with two roads. They could either die under an Israeli bomb, or maybe die in a firefight with the IDF, and maybe have the possibility that they can win. You know, maybe win for yourself, or maybe win for the young Palestinians who don't have the ability to fight for themselves. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, it was either 100% go to the camps, or maybe go down in a blaze of glory and liberate yourself. One of the main reasons why I'm a pacifist is because I believe that human life is a finite resource, and to an extent, and due to that fact, is technically, I guess, sacred. I believe that when you close your eyes for the final time, you do not wake up, you do not go to a magic land, you leave this earth, and you cease to be. What you were 100 years before your death is what you are 100 years after your death. Nothing. And as such, I do not want to die. It might be a hot take, but it's true. I do not want to die. You know, you all may disagree, but I don't. Which means that I would not put myself in a situation which would lead to me to possibly dying. However, should I end up in a situation where I might die regardless of my choices, I will do everything in my power to prevent myself from dying. Again, if a man walks up to me and is threatening me, and I have a method to dispose of the situation, what other option do I have in that scenario? But of course, in like the broader sense, you know, things don't go from like nice, happy, hunky-dory days to magically we wake up and we're in Nazi Germany. The situation erodes to that point. You know, that's just how fascist systems work. They erode to the point, which is why we need to remain informed and prepared to exert every peaceful measure while we have them to hopefully prevent things from getting to that point. Defense has never been in debates. Like, there is no debate in regards to the issue of defense, defending yourself, defense. That's a separate issue. Some would argue it's not, but I'm saying it in the sense, like, in that sense, defense is over there. That is a completely different conversation. You know, I'm not advocating for people to not defend themselves in situations. I mean, I've literally used that example 15 million times of, like, someone defending themselves from being attacked. But I mean, in the broader sense, of course, peace is a better option in the term. That's always the better option to lead with. You know, I don't know if it's the conversation that a lot of people's parents that give them, but it's that phrase like, don't start a fight, but always finish it. That kind of stuff. And again, we should always exert every single element of peaceful means first, whether it be advocating for candidates who might stop things from getting to that far, whether it be things like impeachment, turning for the amendment, or just flat out denying his request, you know. But that one's a little bit like, that one obviously is like, that one is obviously, let's just say there's a reason why I advocate for certain candidates. Like, you know, again, Graham Plattner and Abdullah Saeed, you know, hopefully we'll get some spines in that category for a bit. Or whether it's something as little as making your voice heard by social media, or by, you know, protesting the administration in question. People should not be afraid of their government. Governments should be afraid of their people. You know, again, it's a similar thing. Like, you know, the 99% versus the 1%. That's just the numbers game. I am more so interested in preventing the situation that would lead to a revolution in the first place. Now, some lefties will probably hear that and then get mad and say something along the lines of, like, see, he stated that he's not on the side of revolution. And again, right then and there, that ties into my perspective that I'm saying over and over again. You know, you're more attracted to the idea of a revolution rather than the actual ideas that you would be allegedly fighting for. You know, in my ideal scenario, there would be no need for that to happen, because in my ideal scenario, obviously, the situation would not require one. In my ideal world, there'd be no need for a Palestinian resistance because they would not be under the Zionist boot to begin with. I mean, again, I'm not going to assume that every single revolutionary is like this. You know, again, obviously they're not. Some of you are probably, obviously actually well-intentioned in your belief systems. But you all know, you've all engaged with lefties on Twitter. You've all done that. You know that some of them can be cringe. We all know that. Even Dems, correct socialists, social democrats, that kind of stuff. Even they can be cringe too. Social democrats can be pretty cringe too. Democratic socialists, even sometimes they can be a little cringe. And there's a chance that some of the people who are these so-called revolutionaries might rush to the comment section. But again, that would kind of be proving my point that you would rather spend your time, arguing with a tiny socialist YouTube channel rather than doing anything to further any of your goals. And again, even in the sense, you don't need to be that to be revolutionary. You can have a revolutionary mindset and then transition that into other forms of political action, like direct action, like protests, that kind of stuff. Nobody says no protests. Protests are cool. Everyone loves protests. The Black Panther Party was a revolutionary organization, but they were more than just, getting into firefights with the police officers. They literally opened schools. They opened free lunch programs for their kids in their communities. There's more to it than that. So, to reiterate the question at the beginning of the episode, when will it be time? Hopefully never. But that ball is not in our court. That ball is in the court of the people in power. What they do with it, that's up to them. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to find a future video mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.